today we're going to have a short one, kind of continuing the theme of the last topic, the truth of time. This being Sunday, I want to talk a bit more about how that relates to Christianity. Kind of got into it, but I really was focusing a little bit higher, and I really want to get into some nitty-gritty details about what's been going on over the last 2,000 years. What the timestamp that was represented by the event around 0 AD that has caused us so much interesting history since, and why it has led to a very special time afterwards that seemed like a very dark time. Okay, if you followed my work, if you've read my book, you will know that it is my belief that Jesus was not a real historical character, but represented the energy of a virtual incarnation of God. Because as I told you, God can pick any soul vehicle to work through. And if you look at the history of the times, you will in fact note that among the Jews, among pretty much all peoples of that rough era, there were all sorts of messianic characters who had a different idea of their incarnation as a servant of God. Some were very dark and militaristic. Some were very light and loving and, okay, everything's going to be perfect, like, the image of the fundamentalist Christians these days, at least the ones that aren't fundamentally wanting to kill anyone that doesn't believe in Jesus. And some were reclusive, that, well, we know we got the right answer, but nobody else is listening to us, so we need to go off on a mountain somewhere and start a commune, like the folks in Qumran, like the folks that stewarded the Nag Hammadi texts, which is another source of fairly original copies of Old Testament books and New Testament writings. Okay, so what I am telling you is that this era ushered in by Christianity was one of those special save game points of the God team. And the Borg team. The good guys and the bad guys are making hay out of that. And that is why we're so divided. We have so many different ideas of what Christianity is, what the offshoots of it are, Islam, and new ideas of old religions like Hinduism, Buddhism, etc., etc. We become totally fragmented by our idea of what God is, what spiritual truth is, what objective reality is. And this is all part of a plan. It may look pretty dark and nasty, but I'm going to tell you why it's happening. Because if you remember, I told you that physical reality, as we know it, started out with a Big Bang. Not of one universe, but two universes, two complementary universes joined at the hip, as it were, by one of them representing the creative idea of God, and one of them representing the creative idea of the anti-God. One representing free will, free choice, freedom to make mistakes in the presence of proven laws, and the other representing captive will, with the freedom to let others control your mind and give you ideas that they know wouldn't work, that might make pretty fantasies, but actually lead you down the road towards becoming an authoritarian yourself. Okay, so what does that mean for our history? If we look at all history past then, you see that there have been counter movements to every religion. Orthodox Judaism has been challenged by Kabbalistic Judaism, has been challenged by revisionist Judaism that says, well, the scribes and the Pharisees, we're gonna get a bird from my wife. Wait for it. Yep, this is her statement on my channel usually. At any rate, every religion has become fragmented like that between those that see one vision or another. And the general demarcation point between those visions is one that is idealistically positive. Love, peace, everybody's going to get together. Why can't everybody see what I see? And one which is rather dark and nihilistic. Oh, everything's going to shit. God has abandoned us. Or we've abandoned God, or, something's gone terribly wrong and we need some sort of a great reset. And you see that all around you in the discussions you see on social media between, polarized camps of people. You see lightness and darkness in almost every tribe, depending on what they're talking about. And this is part of this separation of these two universes, which happened as a result of that event. That's what happened in the last major cosmic timestamp event, is a separation of this positive and negative universe. Now, that also coincides with a greater freedom of souls who have grown up in this latest version of karma, which I tell you about, one that supports multiverses, not just two universes, but many universes. This is where the gods who are bound in captivity, which you'll find in the Bible, stories about these god beings who were bound inside the earth. Many were bound inside God's earth. Many were bound inside the anti-earth of Borg. And this was by mutual agreement, because we had to finish testing this law of karma to figure out who won the final battle of the planet Earth's before we could stop the experiment and let these two universes diverge. Let the two Earths diverge. And this is the time we've been in the last 2,000 years, a time of divergence and a time of making choices, which side you want to play on, giving all souls enough time to figure out what team they really want to be on. Do I really want to live in eternal bliss in an authoritarian, micromanaging, spiritual state, ruled by an authoritarian, micromanaging God who, through his mind-controlled servants, manages everything, makes sure that everybody obeys all the rules, and if they are entitled to something, they get it? And if somebody transgresses against those rules, they get immediately punished? This is Borg's idea of perfect law. There are some souls that actually do quite well in that sort of a system. They don't have this creative spark. They don't have a rebellious bone in their body. They just want to do what they're told, be what they can be. If I'm told to take this job, I'll take it and do it because I'm a loyal servant of this Almighty God. who's telling me what to do. And that's feeling good for you. That's just not what is useful and productive for an expanding, growing, evolving creation. And what we're going to see, and what we've been seeing actually since that split between the two primary universes, is gradually souls getting freed from that imprisonment. It's not a whole big, everybody gets freed at the same time. It's a very selective process, which depends on basically God's in training of a certain specialty getting released when an incarnation of the real God, who's focused on their specialty, hits this highest level of attainment, the level 12 understanding of their art, as a real Messiah life where they don't get turned to the dark side during that life. Or on the Borg side, as a Borg Messiah life where they're constantly turned to the dark side and they turn into an authoritarian micromanager of their science, a dogmatic entity like some of the Jesuit scientists we know of in the Catholic Church, who, once they figured out that Catholic dogma wasn't working, created a new scientific dogma. And this was the root of materialist science. It actually started with a sect of the Catholic Church. It actually started with religious people creating a milieu of thought that was basically anti-God. God is dead. This was the marching cry of the postmodern era as it developed. Obviously, God is dead, so we have to make something to fill that gap, whether it's atheism, whether it's communism, whether it's whatever, capitalism, whatever you were worshiping. That became your new God. And it all serves a purpose, but it's not serving the purpose that you think it is if you're a worshiper of one of these false gods of human creation. Now, you can go follow those false gods, and there are universes out there now that are run by your messiahs. But to the extent that those universes are further away from the prime universe of the real God, they're going to be serving the Borg God. They're going to be serving to polarize you into becoming very dogmatic about your beliefs, and very harshly dogmatic, militantly dogmatic, and want to destroy anything in that universe that doesn't quite match up with what you think is the truth. And you can see that right on this planet, all around you, by people that have one issue, one topic, which is so important to them that they will attack anybody viciously if they say one thing out of line with their dogma. And this is what is fragmenting the fake left right now. This woke fake left is becoming fragmented, just like the fake right was before that. Apple pie ma and just the Bible folks before. Okay? Those fundamentalists are just as wrong-headed as the fundamentalists of the left now. Just as wrong-headed as the fundamentalists of communism, of capitalism, of globalism. And to the extent they're willing to push their agenda on others, they want to take over the world for their party, their tribe, they're playing Borg's game. And they will, at the end of this event, this current event we're in, which was predicted by many, many cultures, many apocalyptic prophets, to be right around this time, 2012 plus or minus. And as I've been telling you, I have personal, firsthand knowledge of what's going to drive the end game of that event. I don't know the exact date, the exact set of events that are going to lead up to it in either universe, because that's all in your hands as co-creators of this reality we're in. That's what creation is all about. The real God is through messing with anything, and the bored God doesn't give a damn anymore and will mess with whatever minds, whatever that evil entity can mess with to get more souls, because that's all Borg cares about, is power, having more souls under his command, attracting more souls to his universe or to his strongholds left in God's universe. Because we're still fighting that battle, but now we're fighting it in two separate universes. And this is what the Mandela effect is all about. As I've been telling you, it's about flipping between universes when you make decisions that polarize you into not only one or the other of these primary universes, but also the other teams of universes that have built up around them. Some of the universes that are close to Borg's side, close to being assimilated, are universes of kind of evil-minded gods who think like Borg but still want to be independent of Borg. So if you were to map out in 3 dimensions the multiverse, which is not exactly like it is, so don't start throwing stones at me because it breaks your physics dogma or whatever. This is the 3-dimensional projection, okay? It actually makes more sense. Well, let's call it a 3-dimensional projection anyway. So you've got God's universe over here. You got Borg's universe over here. Let's get it on the screen. Okay, you have other universes of souls that have advanced to the point of having a God-level awareness, which means that they now are aware that they have their own universe of creation, and they can actively control it, and they can actually make it more persistent than lower-level souls who may only get a separate universe for a second while they're doing something that is inconsistent with the universe that they were playing in, which is how the new system of karma works. Anything that is inconsistent, any action you take that's inconsistent with the universe that you were playing in, the team you were playing for, gets shuttled off to an alternate universe for the amount of time it needs to, so you only commit the, quote, sins, the mistakes that you made against your team in a test tube filled with virtual souls. Looks, acts, tastes like the universe you were in, but you're the only one, you're the only real soul experiencing all that. The rest of what you're experiencing is a virtual reality, virtual souls going through the motions of creating the world that you inhabit so you can do some bad things and then get back, hopefully sometime, to the real universe. Sometimes it never happens. Sometimes your actions are so against what either God or Borg was intending for you, or these other gods who have their own universe, that your universe bifurcates and you become aware that, whoa, I'm no longer in this place I was before. Now that could end up being permanent, or you can end up switching from Borg's side to God's side, or between God's side and maybe one of the other gods that's kind of on God's side but thinks they have a little better idea of what's right. And there are many of the love, light, oneness gods, goddesses, who are on God's team but are just kind of ahead of the game because they don't quite get that we still have a while to go to get through this, or they do, and they want to provide like uh, Florence Nightingale service for souls who are so damaged by this spiritual battle that they're not able to fight anymore, and they need some rest and recuperation time. And this is essentially what the universes of some of the positive archetype female gods are like. They do R&R, they do Florence Nightingale work for till they're ready to go back to the fray and not vulnerable to being swayed to the dark side. And this all fits into what I've been telling you about heavens. There is not just one heaven. There are many heavens, and they basically correspond to the work of each of these individual gods who have reached the understanding they have their own universe. And they get to choose their own role in this ongoing spiritual battle. So some of these newborn gods are playing the game that, well, I'm going to be another Borg, and the only way to defeat Borg is by getting more souls than Borg has, which is how evil fights evil, and that's why evil tends to self-destruct. They're trying to use the same weaponry against good, but true good is tolerant, is nonviolent, and doesn't allow itself to be manipulated into hate-filled actions, hate-filled thoughts, making battles with each other where none belong or are productive. And you have shining examples of messiahs of that kind of ilk. Mahatma Gandhi now is dead and was a great prophet of, I don't know, call it government, call it freedom, call it prophet of Indian independence. He was not a perfect guy. If you study his life, he had many faults. The women in his life were not treated that well. But he accomplished something that made a huge, huge difference in this spiritual battle. And I can promise you that Mahatma Gandhi is a god now. And you can prove it by seeing how many people still have him as a central figure in the values that they worship. They look to Mahatma Gandhi for inspiration as they interact with the world. Not because he was Hindu, not because he was Indian, not because he was a lawyer or a great political figure or a leader of a great movement or anything, but just because of the totality of the man had a Messiah-like quality about him. And this is how real Messiahs are. And some of them get well known like Gandhi, and some of them are never known. The well-known ones are often thought of as demons. Certainly Gandhi was thought of as a demon by the British government, or thought of as messiahs. He was certainly thought of as a messiah by the downtrodden poor of India who didn't benefit from the elitist system of the British colonial rule. The same applies in every country. Joan of Arc, old enough in history that, she can now be played as a feminist hero. But her action was not feminist at all. It was surprising in that it arose among a female, but she was playing a male role in this. In fact, she, to our knowledge, never had any interest in sexual things at all. And when she was abused and tortured, which she was, it was a horrible sin and created a lot of horrible karma, exposed a lot of horrible karma in the British, who were not necessarily the bad guys there. In fact, the influence of the British monarchy in France was essentially what kept France divided enough to allow the German peoples to recover from basically nearly being exterminated by Roman predators. They hated the Germans. I mean, that was the huge dream of every Roman Empire, was going and finally defeating all the Germans and taking the Roman Empire all the way to the North Sea. And ultimately, that's what brought down the Roman Empire, because that created negative energies, karma, which came back to bite them. The second that there was any weakness in Rome, a new emperor, a great defeat somewhere else, hordes of Germans came over and started attacking the Roman Empire and stealing everything in sight, or eventually forming settlements. Same happened with the Eastern Empire. This is the nature of things. Equal and opposite reaction, which I'm telling you, I've told you many times, is how karma, one of the fundamental things about karma that's always been a factor of karma, even as it was developing. This is the initial karma of this universe care, the initial karma of how time works. Why time only goes one way, and it's very difficult to change the past. Because the past is much less elastic than the future. Okay, so how does this tie into the Bill and Ted Borg and God's excellent adventure story? For the last 2,000 years, it's been an opportunity for entities that resulted from that last timestamp, the timeline that resulted from that last midpoint timestamp of 2,000 years ago. They have this limited time before the next major timestamp to go and try to make changes, try to affect the past that is creating their future. So there is a battle for the future going on in parallel with the battle for the present. And a battle for the past that goes into the battle for the present and the battle for the future. But those who want to make changes further back have a much more difficult time of it. If you want to go back to the beginning of the universe and change the properties of hydrogen, the universes, change the properties of hydrogen, helium, lithium, etc., you've got to create an incredible amount of energy and do an incredible amount of testing in those past timestamps to get anything approved. You've got to be a friggin' incredible spiritual scientist to get something approved that far. Now, that's no reason you shouldn't study that. And those that are inclined to study human history going back before the flood, nobody's telling you shouldn't do that. It's very important, and you're going to find things. Some of what you're going to find is evidence planted from the future, which will encourage a certain narrative. And those narratives may be motivated by the Borg team or may be motivated by the God team. And you're not really going to know. Were there ancient astronauts? Did they have technology like ours? Did they have metals that we don't know about that we might rediscover and use? Yes, possibly. But like I was talking about in the lithium story, be careful, because some of what they may have planted may lead us down dark paths of our own destruction. And in the grand scheme of things, it doesn't really matter if a species gets destroyed, because of DNA. Any species that ever existed can get recreated. You just turn on some genes, turn off some others, and bang, you can have back any species you ever wanted that ever existed. And that's one of the reasons humanity exists. On this planet, in this solar system, in this galaxy, we're gathered up the pieces that basically have the ability to create any useful, intelligent, God-level species there ever was. And they're all useful, even if it's in a dark way. As I told you, the dark side is not as smart as the light side. God always wins in the end. It's not because he's more powerful, because his team is run by a better set of laws. Free will, freedom of thought, freedom to create and make mistakes and pay through karma for what we do wrong. The freedom to learn through many reincarnations what our nature is and what we're good at, what we're not good at. This is God. This is why God's team always wins. It's a collective power that comes from the collection of free-willed, created souls. And no matter how many souls exist, how many souls are captured by Borg or other Borg wannabe universes, there will always be more energy in support of God's team. So while I'm telling you not to worry, I'm also telling you that you need to pick a side. Because if you don't, if you say, well, this is all too much for me, I'm just going to sit back and watch Netflix and keep doing the same old job I'm doing and keep my head low and wait till the dust settles. This is a choice, but it's a choice that is not going to set you on a path to being needed by humanity once we become a full-fledged God species, which is what this timestamp is all about. We're done experimenting with humanity. We don't need a bunch of... Just a minute, Ollie, I'm not done yet. Okay, what you need? Come on, you can look. What you need? Huh? I'm working. I'll be done soon. At any rate, you can't just fence sit on this. The time is short. If you want to be a fence sitter, go ahead. But humanity doesn't need you in the next phase of creation. I'm sorry, there are plenty of other developing species that are better suited to you. There are millions of planets where, there's a species that's kind of like humanity that is just starting to become aware of itself. Just starting to understand that there's something more important going on than just beating each other over the head and stealing stuff from somebody who's weaker than you. And that's the kind of planet, that's the kind of universe you're headed to if you're not actively engaged in this, or whatever team you want to play for. So get busy, people. Don't be lazy. I know it's hard to figure out what's what. That's why you need to do research. That's why you need to keep asking questions of your own government, of your own spiritual leaders, of everything. Because I can tell you, no matter what's your dogma, no matter who is your hero, whether it's Sigmund Freud or Carl Jung or Karl Marx or whatever. What's the guy? Ibrahim Kendi, the critical race theory idiot. Whatever you're embracing as your dogma, as your God, they're wrong. At least in part, if they're not telling you the same things I am. And I'm not telling you that being hubristic, I'm not telling you that because I've lost my humility. I'm telling you that because it's very important to you. I'm not trying to make money off my channel. I've never made a cent off any of the work I've done. Well, I think I've made a total of about at this point $300 in royalties from my books on Amazon. Now, if that is profiteering from what I do, what I'm trying to teach you, if that makes me a Satan, an anti-Messiah, an antichrist, then I think you better go back and look at what those things are supposed to be. Anyway, I think I've filled in the gaps from the last one. I went a little bit longer than I intended, but I think that was very useful to continue the discussion. Till we meet again, it's Rob Trump for the Honest Hour. Like, share, subscribe, argue, whatever. Take care.